Good morning to all. It's a fine morning here in Belfast, and I gather it's probably a fine morning in Donegal. Any morning in Donegal is a fine morning in one sense or another of the word or another. Would that be true, Pat? That would be
It's a
fine.
beautiful morning here, Jude.
Hmm.
In fact, I just realised there's a curtain sort of blocking a bit of a view, so I put it back. You should be able to see me much better now.
Oh,
A
my,
lighter,
my,
more
and
light coming
all
through the
your
window.
magnificence.
Oh, my magnificence.
Listen,
And there's a lot of me.
I was thinking the other day, I don't want to linger on this, but I was watching, the way the BBC News 24 goes around the world,
Yeah.
countdown to the news. Um, I was thinking about all the various cities in the world and how, you could have lived your life. Probably if you wanted to, you probably could have lived your life in any number of them. Did you ever wonder what that would be like? Do you ever wonder
Yeah.
about all the paths not taken?
Hey, funny, I was chatting to a man in Australia the last day, and we were chatting about that very thing, sliding doors. He's in Australia nearly 60 years. He's married, I think, 58 years now. And a couple of things that happened to him in Ireland. Had they not happened, he probably would have stayed here. But he went to Australia and so on. And we're just chatting about, that famous film Sliding Doors that the girl gets
Oh,
the
great
train
movie. Marvelous
uh,
movie.
and the door closes and something happens there. Then part two, the door opens and she gets in and she has a different life. Dude, we've all had, I think, sliding door moments.
Hmm. Do you regret? I mean, do you have a pang of nostalgia for maybe you might have been living somewhere else, or are you totally 100% content with the place you've built your life?
Dude, there's one. I would have loved to have lived in Australia. I was in Australia twice, and Australia's they call it the lucky country. I don't know, for maybe the guys who went out there on the boats in the 1700s. I don't know how lucky it was for them, but it's a
Dream of
big,
it.
wide open country. There's animals and birds you've never seen parakeets, and it's a beautiful country. And okay, maybe in the central part of it you couldn't live there, but along the coast, and the quality of life people have. Dude, they've plenty of space. There's nobody crowded in on the top of you, and there's a sort of laid back lifestyle there, which I like. But
Hmm.
the famous one was I had a thing one day, and there's a wee priest in Derry. He was originally from Donegal, and he was telling a story about two friends meet. One was a sort of guy who they were brought up in a wee small town in Donegal. And anyway, one went off and travelled the world and had all girlfriends. The other boy married the girl next door.
Ah,
Anyway, they met in the pub. The story went, the short version of a very long story was one said to the other, geez, I would have loved your life. And the other boy turned around, I would love yours. Bottom line is, we all want what the other person has.
aye, that's right. That's right. There's a rather more religious version of that about the guy that says to God, "Oh God, I can't carry this cross you give me. It's too much, too much." Uh, and God says, "Well, look, you come in here. I've got an array of crosses here, and you can take your pick." And the guy looks at one and tries it. Oh, that's too big. The next one, that's very awkward. Geez, that one I kept tripping over it. And then finally he said, "Oh, geez, this one is exactly right. That's exactly right." And that's the one he came in with.
I mean, the simple things. Let's boil it down. You ever go to a restaurant and they give you a menu and you pick someone and somebody else picks the other thing and then you look over them. I wish I'd have picked what they had picked. You know, it's just, I think we always want to sort of say, no, the grass is greener on the other side all the time. It's a human trait.
Well, actually, that's another story, the whole thing about menus, because most of the time I don't know what the bloody thing means. Very often
Yeah.
it's in French and stuff. So I tend to say to my wife, do I like, I'll point to the particular one. Anyway,
Remember, anyway, go ahead.
were you going to say something there, Pat?
I know. I remember. It reminded me of Billy Connolly. That what you're after saying there. And
Yeah.
one time he would come home and his mother wasn't there, and he asked his father, "How many sugars do you put in your tea?" He says, "I don't know. Ask your mother." In other words, he didn't know how many sugars he got in his own tea.
That's very good. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
let's go to the bigger political picture. The news, of course, that was led, certainly the news in RTE last night and all day was Mairead McGuinness, who used to be working for RTE, then
yeah,
went to Europe and was a shining light. Did very well in terms of Brexit. I mean, she handled the Brits with consummate ease and
absolutely.
she became more and more stylish. as I watched her, her dress and everything, and her glasses and all the rest of it became more Europeanized, more sophisticated.
Yeah, that's the
She
word you
just was
use.
an impressive woman. So in some ways, I would have tipped her. I would have quite liked her as a president. And they say she's been keen on it. Now she's a vice president. Is she still a vice president in the European Union?
No, I don't think so. No, no,
Was
no.
she at any
She's a
stage?
former vice president.
Aye,
Uh,
aye. So she packed
yeah.
that in. That's interesting. So she
No,
not.
no, she don't think. No, Jude. After the last elections, I think her grouping lost so many seats that she just didn't have the votes. Now I'm open to correction on that, but it's something like
Yeah,
that.
but she's still an MEP.
She's still an ME. She was vice president of the European Parliament, and as you said, Jude, she was a. I knew her vaguely, and I mean very, very vaguely years ago. I was at a function, and she was at it as well. But anyway, she was a very, very impressive woman,
Mm.
and Jude, I would say she was probably the favorite to win the
Oh, she
presidential
was.
race on many levels.
Mm.
No, I was going to say her behavior, not her behavior, her performance, as you rightly described it. I saw her in Question Time on BBC when it was hot and heavy about Brexit,
Mm.
and she reminded me in a way of John Hume. That sort of very logical, very sort of clinical. Don't get excited. Don't fall for the insults. She just sort of plowed through what she had to say in a very sophisticated, intelligent way. And I remember at the time thinking, no, I don't agree totally with her ideology, political ideology,
Mm.
but she was a very, very impressive woman.
I agree. And do you think will this be much of a setback for Fine Gael and Simon Harris? Because a lot of prestige is attached now to if your candidate from your party gets into the Áras. I mean,
Yeah.
Michael D did a great deal for Labour, I think, by being in the
Mhm.
Áras. What do you think is? I thought Simon Harris on TV last night looked a bit unnerved, perhaps, or maybe I'm reading that into it.
Well, I didn't know. In fairness, I didn't see Simon Harris last night, but she would have been, as I'm repeating myself here, would have been the favourite. Now, who Finn Gael go and get now? And Jude, there's always going to be that, but well, your second choice, no matter what.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point, Pat. I hadn't
Uh,
thought about that.
uh,
There's three people
yeah,
lining up at present for Fine Gael. Sean Kelly, who has said in the fairly recent past about the fact that being president, not a real role at all. It's all really just ceremonial stuff. So
yeah.
if he was to go for the job, he'd have to sort of eat his words
Uh,
then
uh,
and say it was a very
I'd
important
have
job.
to roll back in that big time. Yeah.
Francis Fitzgerald, another stalwart of Fine Gael, and finally Heather Humphreys, whom the Irish Times this morning described as um, charismatic. Would you say that's a reasonable description of her?
I'd say that's a slight exaggeration. Now comes across as a nice woman, and of
Uh,
course, she's got one big advantage. She's a Protestant, and
exactly. I was going to say that. Yeah.
and our country at the minute, I think anybody that as comes across as inclusive, we like to embrace that.
Mm,
So, and now, by all accounts, she was a very good minister. So, I
mm,
remember the time. I think it was Enda Kenny promoted her. Apparently, she was shocked. She says when she got the call, someone says, "Letitia wants to speak to you." The day they were picking the cabinet, she didn't expect anything, and she was suddenly elevated to a minister. It was agriculture. I can't remember.
mm,
Anyway, so she said herself it was the last thing she was expecting.
mm,
But anyway, by all accounts, she performed very well, and she was quite a good media performer. And
mm.
by all accounts, no, charismatic. She do charismatic. Jude, sometimes maybe people are very charismatic in a one-to-one situation, but she didn't never come across as charismatic on
Not at
TV.
all. Not at all. Not at all. I think she looks like sounds and looks like a pleasant woman. Pretty competent at her job, but I wouldn't say she was outstanding in the way, for example, Mary Robinson was,
No, no,
or even
we
Mary the
Michael
Second.
D.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
so who would you like to see standing then for, or would you decide
So
on any?
I would like to see. No, I don't know. Sorry, maybe I cut across you, but I'd like to see Mary Lou standing. I really would.
Would you? Yeah,
Uh,
we talked about this before. I think I would worry very much about that. I think I would be that really would be playing senior hurling, as they say. It would be really
yeah,
putting
she was brilliant. She was one.
all your chips on one one number. And
See, Martin McGuinness had the whiff of cardite with him, and he was an easy target for all the Dublin Four West Brits, you know what, and particularly in the media. That was, remember O'Callaghan's one, what do you call him, Miriam O'Callaghan? When did you last go to the fishing? Like, Jesus, Judah, I still think that was a highly, highly offensive question to ask
oh,
anybody. You know,
shocking, shocking.
did they ask any of the rest of them when did they last go to
Exactly,
confession?
exactly
But
what I
anyway,
thought.
let's move. And then there was your woman. What was her? The Annie Rita, the Shauna Rita's
Oh
daughter
yeah,
from
yeah.
Cork. Like she seriously underperformed, but
Oh
she seriously underperformed in the debates as well. Strictly speaking, she should have. She was the daughter of probably the most revered Irish culture icon nearly of the last 100 years.
yeah.
She had the looks, the personality, but by God, did she bomb big time?
Just
She just
didn't
didn't
work
do
out.
it.
Didn't
So
you?
maybe there's a lesson for Sinn Féin there. Don't risk your top people.
Yeah, it's hard to know. You see, I think if Mary Lewis to go for it and get it, it certainly would be great news for for Sinn Féin. If she was to go for it and not get it, um, it would look very bad, even worse than it does for Fine Gael now with MAIREAD McGuinness dropping out. Uh, but this thing about the fact that they were able to throw up to Martin McGuinness, when did he last go to confession? That'll never stop. That'll never
Yeah.
stop. If Mary Lou was to run, I'll guarantee they'd be asking her, do you go along with Michelle O'Neill's view that the
There
conflict
was no
was
alternative.
inevitable, couldn't be helped, people had to go to violent means? They would never stop. They would hammer it like nobody's business, I'd say. Um,
Jude, I remember a lot of people coming on the Gaza. Do you condemn Hamas? Jesus, Jude, like, in other words, you had to pass the moral test. Do you come? The question should have been asked. One day, I can't remember who, I think it was your man who's got cancer now, the TD, the left wing TD. He says, I am not answering that question. He says, you're setting him up. And they got into a whole row. It was an RT in drive time because the guy with double barrel name, jeez,
I know, I know.
even
Eh,
anyway, bottom line of it all, Jude, I think the same in Ireland. When anybody from Sinn Féin, did you support the armed campaign, the military campaign and all the rest of it? Like, the only thing difference, Jude, I think a lot of young people know Mary Lou had nothing to do with what happened in the north. She was not in the IRA, as far as I'm aware, and so on. And she's very good at articulating what happened in the north and so on. So I don't know if they could pin it too much on her, but of course, as you rightly say, they'll try it.
hmm. So you'd be prepared to take the gamble if it was left to you to decide, Pat. It won't be
Yeah.
left to you
Jude,
to
the,
decide,
the thing
but
about the presidency, it's not about your policies, it's not about anything, it's about your personality, and it's you symbolize what the state's about. And I think Mary Lou, in a way, and we've mentioned this before, Jude. I think Sinn Féin have this plan that the border pool by 2030. If they could get somebody into Iris and Outram, the first citizen of this state, and that person is Sinn Féin, and they are symbolising that, hey, we want a Irish unity and we want a border pool. Hey, Jude, the symbolism there's quite
it'd be
serious.
massive. It'd be massive. But
Right.
I'd worry about putting all your chips on the table. Uh,
Yeah, I agree with you,
it'd
but
be
but
kind of
that's it's a high strategy, high
kind of
risk game.
scary. But I tell you what, I'd rather see them agree on some figure that's not in Sinn Féin, but one that's acceptable to all the parties of the left. Labour now has already said they'll go with this woman, what's her name? Um,
Family from Galway.
Catherine Connolly. They've said they'll
Yeah.
go with her. Uh, if at least the remaining left parties were to agree on a candidate with Sinn Féin, I think that'd be a good idea. Um,
Mm.
but well, it's hard to know. Hard to know. Certainly, it'd be electrifying if Mary Lou was to run for it. Um, yeah. What about this young guy, Gareth Sheridan? He's 35.
Yeah, the
He's a
pharmaceutical guy.
millionaire several
Aye.
times over.
Like
Fancy him.
Jude, that's apparently if you're really smart, you should never admit your ignorance live on air. But I had never heard of him until last Sunday or
I
last
know,
whatever day
buddy.
last week.
No,
Never heard
but
of him.
his own mother was asking questions. Who's this guy?
You
Um,
know, he's not even a legend in his own household.
that's right.
But
He was fined. The Irish Times has a story that he was fined in 2018 for making misleading statements. That's another way of saying telling lies about his
yeah,
company. So
yeah.
that's not good for getting off.
Yeah, well, you know something. I wouldn't hold that against him because he must have been very young and he's probably trying to push his company and so on. And he wouldn't be the first person to hold a few, porkies about, hey, my company is such a success and all that. If you're looking for investors and all the rest,
Uh,
anyway, whatever he's done, it's worked for him because he's now very
well, he's
successful
got
by
money,
all accounts.
but he's the part. His company's on the brink of really taking off into the stratosphere. So people are
Yeah,
scratching their heads
yeah.
and saying, "How come this guy is going to stop doing that and go into the arts?" Seems strange.
Uh,
I
but
got
just to revert to that. Uh, I was watching a thing on yesterday. Trump on I think it was Wednesday put up a thing about the fact that I donate all my salary to I don't take my salary. I'm one of the first presidents ever. Jude, the New York Times says his family it's possible they will make 3.2 billion from his presidency. And then I saw what do you call it? His son. He was on one of those American. He says, "What are we supposed to do? My dad is a businessman, and are we supposed to give up our business because he's president of the?" But he
the
is
answer is yes,
absolutely
yes, you
grifting
are.
the yeah, well, Jimmy Carter had a wee peanut farm. He put it into sort of a blind trust,
Hmm.
so it couldn't be accused of. But Donald Trump is absolutely using the presidency to enrich his family. There's deals in the Middle East about golf clubs. Whatever you call the young fella, his son, I can't remember his name at the minute. It's got off the top of me. He joined this private equity firm, and out of nowhere, they've got massive money from the Arab world, the petrochemical people. Suddenly, they're making billions and so on. So don't tell me he hasn't used to the presidency as a vehicle to enrich
Well,
himself
of
and his
course, I
cronies.
think everybody will acknowledge that. In fact, I saw a thing said out of cryptocurrency. You know the way the very first
Yeah,
day it is cryptocurrency, but they
and
made something like
his wife
they made something like
Melinda, or whatever you call
uh,
her, she is a
two billion
Bitcoin.
since he was elected. 2 billion.
They reckon that no one's quite sure how much they've made from that. But
Aye.
hey, but just when I mentioned Trump, there's two things. He and Putin are meeting today in
Yeah.
Alaska. By the way, Trump referred to Alaska as Russia about 3 or 4 times during the week. Alaska is in America, just in case you know.
Uh, uh, uh,
Secondly, uh, Trump is a thug. And he's a fascist, and he's a megalomaniac. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who is trolling Trump brilliantly. He was having a meeting apparently either last night or the night before, somewhere in California, and he had a big crowd. And guess what happened? ICE agents appeared outside where he was having the meeting and tried to arrest people. It was deliberate. It's shades of Nazism. Remember, in the early days, any of Hitler's opponents showed up and anything, the SS would show up and sort of intimidate the people and all the rest.
mm.
Trump is doing exactly. Do you imagine the governor of California, which I think would be the fourth richest state in the world, or the fifth if it was independent? A huge, big, successful state, and the president of the United States is trying to intimidate, and by the way, publicly doing so. It's unbelievable what's happening in America.
He's appalling. I was listening. This is sort of going slightly sideways, but Trump's going to Alaska to look at the whole situation with the Ukraine and Russia. The other big
Aye.
crisis, of course, we've talked about again and again, is the Middle East and Gaza. Now,
Yeah,
a guy that I listen to, and he's worth listening to occasionally at least, a wee bit solemn, but he is good, is Ezra Klein, I think. And
yeah,
he has a podcast, and his latest podcast, I would urge you, Pat, to listen to it because he
yeah,
starts it by he is Jewish himself.
yeah,
He's a journalist for the New York Times. I've always thought he was in his podcasts about the Middle East and about Gaza just a wee bit circumspect about criticizing Israel, which was,
yeah.
it's sort of understandable. In another way, it shouldn't be like that.
Absolutely.
But he started his podcast this last week by playing a clip from Biden, who talks about shortly after October the 7th, 2023, was it? And he
Yeah,
says, Biden says, October the 7th was a terrible day for Israel. if you think about it, he says, think of 9/11, then think of 9/11 multiplied by 15. It's like 15 9/11s happening to the state of Israel, this invasion by Hamas. Ezra Klein goes on to look at other proportions and says the present estimate of Gaza deaths is at least 61,000. 61,000 people killed. He says there are 2 million Gazans. And if you do a proportion, if you do the 9/11 test, as Joe
Yes,
Biden did,
15.
that would be like what has fallen on them would be like 2,500 9/11s.
9/11,
Can
yeah.
you begin to imagine what that's like? He says there was more bomb tonnage dropped on Gaza than was dropped on London and Dresden and Hamburg put together throughout the Second World War.
Yeah.
I think when people put it in those kind of terms, you begin to see how fucking awful it is and how helpless we feel, or maybe we're just making
Yeah.
ourselves helpless. I am astonished that somebody hasn't done something terribly dramatic, like, I don't know, blow up somebody or blow themselves up or whatever.
No,
Because it is so
well, by the
bad.
way, Jude, they said there's 100,000 tons dropped on Gaza. That is more than was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the atomic bombs. You just said something there too that triggers. Apparently, Netanyahu has said he has fears for his safety and that of his family. That it was yeah, yeah, exactly. Apparently, but you see, 83% of the people of Israel want the war ended, and they want the hostages back. He wants to take over Gaza and all the rest. But hey, Jude, getting back to Joe Biden, I think it's a terrible, what would you say, slur? That's not a strong enough word on his legacy, his support for Israel. I think it's an unbelievable. It's like Tony Blair's Iraq
Oh, yeah,
war, a
exactly.
massive,
Exactly.
what was stain
A guy that most
on
people
his
liked
legacy.
and thought he was
He
doing
says,
a good job.
what it can, Biden says, I don't think you have to be a Jew to be a Zionist, and I am a Zionist. And Jude, he allowed he he could have done a lot to stop what was happening, and he didn't. And now Trump, I think Trump's the same. He just sort of the Americans. Trump said the other day, "I'll let the Israelis finish the job." Jesus, Jude, hey, Jude, we've said this a million times, but it really does seem that the world has gone totally fucked up, and there's no other expression for it. You can get arrested in London for saying "stop the genocide," but if you say come out with a placard supporting the genocide, you won't get arrested. How does that work?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, oh well. Let's come down to a local thing. I saw this article in the Irish News, and it had a heading. It was an editorial, and it said, "Enough of this sectarian poison. Derry deserves better." What do you think they were referring to?
Judah, I actually saw that bonfire, and Judah, put it like this, I, I, I am so disappointed in that any nationalist or any and Judah, I was asking somebody who knows quite a lot about these young fellas. There's a whole group, and there's shadowy figures. A lot of them are dissident Republicans,
Yeah,
and they're basically sort of flexing their arms on the backside. There's a campaign nearly non-stop at the minute, to tell Sinn Féin to fuck off and all this sort of. If you read social media,
yeah,
you know. But hey, Jude, I think these people don't speak for very many people. But here's the thing: August 15th bonfire. They put up a bonfire, and one was a poster of 15-year-old. I think his name was Kyle Bonus, Bonnes. I think he was drowned. Dude, why would anybody put a wee Protestant guy? Why would anybody do that? It's sectarian. It's despicable. It's disgusting. And Jude, I see the people. I think those people who and I know Sinn Féin, I know community groups, I know the residents, I know the Catholic Church. Nobody wants this bonfire, but I don't know what these people, encouraging these young fellas, the mindless morons, and they are mindless morons, Joe, because they're a reflection on the Catholic community. of a bonfire like this is despicable. It takes away all moral authority, high ground from the Catholic community when they complain about what's happening in Belfast and various other places.
I couldn't agree with you more, Pat. It really is pathetic. However, I can understand why they do it. I'm not sure they're mindless. If you ever go to any,
Oh, but the people behind it, Jude, are not mindless, but
I know, but
the young
they
fellas,
have a strategy. Yeah.
yeah,
You see, if you go to there, if you go to Windsor Park, for example, to a football game, people will shout anything on earth if they think it will really rile the opposition. So,
yeah,
it might be racism is the best one to get out. Okay, we'll make a racist chant. It might be to do with people's religion. Let's make a religious chant. So that's just the nature of people. There are people who will reach for any weapon, however despicable. Oh, geez, what's going on here, Pat? We're
yeah.
running out of time, it says. Oh, God.
No, it says here remaining meeting time 9:55.
Oh, gee. Oh, I'm back again now. Something came up there and I couldn't see anything. Anyway, they'll reach for any racist or sectarian, whatever they think will really rile the opposition. I think it's a
Yeah.
damn stupid thing because in Belfast, the whole thing of the Féile was to sort of replace these bonfires they used to have on August the
Bonfires.
15th, which became actually bonfires against to commemoration of internment. But they made it into something really, really good and something they can be
Yeah.
proud of. Why the hell would they allow? How popular, Pat? How popular are the dissidents and these young fellows that are saying this kind of thing? How popular are they in Derry? What proportion of the population would you say?
Let's say very, very, very minor, very
Well,
minor, because
leave aside the question of the middle class. I'm talking about working class areas. Say in the Bogside. How popular are they in the Bogside?
maybe get 10%. No, that's quite considerable. But when you work on the percentage that 90% are not in favour, but 10%, say, what's the population of the Bogside Craig? Maybe 15, 20,000 people. So maybe 3,000 people, um, Judy, see, I said to a certain priest one time about the distance not having a lot of support. And he said, "Wait a minute, Pat. There was a distance meeting in a certain building in Derry, and he says 600 people showed up at it. Now, this is a couple of years ago, but having said that, Jude, I have to acknowledge that's a fact. Jude, there are those people in Derry for a whole lot of reasons. And you alluded to it earlier on. There are people who don't like. Did my son die for for Sinn Féin to go into government with the unionists? I know that my brother spent 15 years in jail for bugger all. You know, where's the improvement? Where's the jobs? Where's the employment? Where are the opportunities for young Catholics who are not maybe on the middle class, Colmore Road set, etc. Dude, I've always remembered, and she was a brilliant girl. She worked with me in the journal. And I was only new and I was very naive. And she turned around, she says to me, Pat, there's them and us. And I actually says to her, she was a young girl called Siobhan Cudd at the time. And I says, right, Siobhan, what do you mean by that? She says, there's the Culmore Catholics and there's the ones that live on the Bogside. See, I thought she was talking about Protestants and Catholics. She was chatting about Catholics and Catholics.
Yes,
And it was a very good learning lesson. And the bog, that's where, and places like that, where the British Army came in, there was a totally different attitude than up the Culmore Road that John Hume set, where the teachers, the accountants, and the solicitors lived, where the houses didn't get raided.
yeah. I was listening to somebody who was talking about the Troubles, and they were very emphatic on this point. It's one that always struck me too. Is 99% of the violence was from people in the working class and, in many respects, deprived areas, both of unionists and of nationalists. That
Yeah,
has ever been the case. Um,
yeah,
so I sometimes have sympathy with those people like Emma McCann who would say the whole thing's a class thing, not a
yeah.
nationalist thing, and that's a distraction. But well, I sort of agree with him, but I think maybe there was at one stage, I think maybe before 1916 or maybe shortly after it, there was a slogan, Labour must wait.
Yeah.
That is to say, we've got to work for the unity of the country before you can start saying, yes, we've now got to implement justice. Um, would you hold that? I hold that view myself, actually. I think if you
Yeah.
start concentrating, you see, if you think of the Workers' Party, that was really the official IRA morphed into the
Mm.
Workers' Party. Got
Uh,
nowhere. I look
uh,
at Eamon McCann, one of the most brilliant minds ever to come out of St. Collins, in my opinion. Um,
yeah.
a very shrewd guy, writes very well, speaks very well. But where has he ever gone in terms of politics? I mean, where has he ever
Uh,
been effective as a politician?
mm.
So maybe we've got to concentrate on certain things. And I would say let's concentrate on the national question, the constitutional question. And maybe in the course of that, if we're doing a planning for it, we can plan into that some more equal distribution of wealth in the coming state. How does
Yeah.
that sound to you?
Yeah, I recall Martin McGuinness on many occasions. At one stage, the Republican music, they were looking for a socialist republic. That was
Yeah,
mentioned,
yeah, yeah, that was it.
Jude,
I remember
and,
that
and they
well.
and they dropped that now. There's no mention now of a socialist republic. Jude, I presume sometimes the bigger picture is getting sort of unity, and then we work out the sort of the later. Uh, but sure, look at Connolly. He wanted a socialist republic, and they shot him against the wall while still on a stretcher. Jude, see in this country, I don't know. And look, to answer your question originally, I would presume there are some people in the Bogside and the Creggan area support this, but the definitive answer is without question, 90 to 95% of the people don't.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of dispiriting to see people, young fellas, aping the likes of the scum that put up the bonfires in Belfast. Right. Have we anything else to talk about? Are we fed up
Well,
now talking, or
well, we did
4 minutes
mention
left?
there's
Yeah.
two things. JD Vance showed up in Britain this week,
Oh, yes.
and Trump is showing up, and
Yeah.
Trump says today, Jude, there's a 25% chance of a deal in Ukraine. What do you think?
Well, is there no way of No, he didn't say that. What he
He
said
did.
was, he said there's a 25% chance it won't work. That's what he said.
Okay.
That's exactly what he said. I said, no,
That's a
no, I
negative.
never heard anybody frame the chances that way. If you
Yeah.
translate that, what he's saying is there's a 75% chance it will work.
Well, I suppose
Very, very,
I think he said there's a 25% chance it won't be successful. Yeah, you're right. It's a negative rather
yeah,
than
yeah. Oh, not kind of a negative. I don't know whether it will or not, but I'm glad to see that he's working for it, and maybe. You see, I suppose it comes down to this: do you see Putin as being another Hitler? Grabbing, encroaching, never satisfied, dare I say, like an alligator wanting more and more and more? Or do you
Well,
see him
someday,
as a
Jude,
guy?
we must get our friend Jim Sharkey, who's a former ambassador to Russia and who has a much more sympathetic attitude towards Russia than me and you might have.
Do you think when he come on and sit with, and
Jim,
don't forget he's a
Jim has
diplomat?
made the point. Jim has made the point that Russia does have and he doesn't agree with Putin, what Putin's done, but he says there's a sympathetic case to be made for Russia. They have legitimate concerns about what's going on, and I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Uh, by the way, well, just about 2 minutes. Did you see that video I put up of Kevin Maher?
No, if
Didn't
I
see
can go,
it.
that's one of the things I have. No,
That's a
that's one of
treat
my
in
things I've.
store for you, Pat. Treat in
I
store.
no, no, I always watch them, but what do you call it? This week I've been sort of busy at different things. In
Aye,
fact,
aye,
I said
yeah,
to myself, I'm going to get around to watching
yeah.
probably today.
It's very interesting because he's a very good talker, and
Uh,
he really seems to have a grip on things. But I was pushing him towards this, and I would be
What about it? You should explain to our viewers who Kevin Maher is, by the way.
well, I'm not actually sure who he is. He's an
He
author.
was let me tell you, he was an advisor to the Labour Party under Tony Blair.
Uh, and he's obviously Irish in his background with a name like Kevin Maher. And he's a journalist, and he's a part, I think, I'm not sure if officially or not, of Ireland's Future, that group. But he's
He's written a book. I have a book there somewhere. I think he's basically said Irish unity is inevitable.
oh yeah, he's convinced of it. And
Mm.
his point is that the more stuff like this that's done, the better. Do you think, Pat? Here's a question. We'll just leave you with this one. See these videos that I did with these people. Some of them are getting really high hits. Do
Yeah,
you think that worth exploring further?
absolutely. Jude, what do you call it? We have got quite a few viewers these days. We'll not
Mm.
disclose how many, but I presume they are people who are influencers in their community.
Yeah,
These are the
yeah.
people who are interested in politics and about the future of this island.
Uh-huh.
So if we can sort of set people up to have a
Mhm.
discussion point to
Mhm.
make policy decisions that point people in a certain way, I would certainly go for it.
Okay, that's great, Pat. Put our shoulders to the wheel, eh?
To the wheel,
Oh,
yes. On
okay,
that
Pat.
note,
Enjoy the
all the best,
weekend
Jude.
then. Don't
Enjoy
get
the weekend.
sunburned.
Beautiful day here.